what I've learned is that we don't necessarily just need more answers. We actually need more questions. And we need to question ourselves and each other more, because that's where not only will we find our path forward, we'll find the real solutions. Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back or welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. As you know, this is the show where I get to have the privilege of having weekly conversations with the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers across all sectors and segments of society and industry as we come together to try to better understand how to navigate this complex, complicated world we live in, while also aspiring to leave this world a little bit better than we found it. And today, we're going to do something a little bit different. It's me. Welcome back. Welcome to, if you're just joining us for the first time, you're going to catch us on kind of a unique episode that we're going to drop in here. I'm going to call this what 6 months of Entrepreneurial Thinkers has taught me. These conversations, these experiences, these times that I get to sit here and share these incredible conversations with these incredible people who we refer to as alumni of our show, because their contributions to our community and their interactions with us and the value that they provide to not only us, but also then to each other, is just so much more important than just referring to them as guests in a really transactional way. So today we're going to do something a little bit different. As I said, no guest, no interview, no panel discussion, just a conversation between you and me. As we're reaching the halfway point of 2026, just a smidge before my 58th birthday here in a couple weeks, I wanted to take some time to reflect on what we've learned together over these past 6 months. Some of the themes that keep showing up in the conversations with these entrepreneurial thinkers, these founders, investors, educators, nonprofit leaders, civic leaders, elected officials, and community builders, and share also just a little bit about what's happening behind the scenes here at Entrepreneurial Thinkers and the Storytellers Company. Whether you've been listening for years or you've just discovered the show recently, obviously, thank you for being a part of our growing community. It means the world to me that I get the chance to literally try to turn this into the way that I make a living. And I would not be able to do it without everybody in this community, who I'll talk about a little bit later. But also in a funny kind of total transparency way that I love to do with everybody all the time. In a funny kind of quirk of our scheduling that happens every once in a while, like once a year, once every 2 years, we wound up with a little gap in our calendar between all of our recently amazing conversations that you've been listening to or watching, and then the 10 upcoming conversations that we already have booked with some incredible guests. And I thought, you know what? Let's fill this gap this week by dropping in and talking with everybody about how 2026 is unfolding from the seat that I sit in here. So that's what we're going to do. So a few different things. First, I want to kind of just share with you some of the patterns that I'm seeing. One of the privileges of hosting this show is that I get a front row seat to hundreds of conversations. I think this episode, when it releases, will be like episode 213, right? And each of these conversations with each of these people are building or leading or thinking differently, innovatively about incredible things that, as I like to joke all the time, right? It's things that they are obsessed about that I'm not obsessed about, or that we're not obsessed about every day. And therefore we get to learn from their obsession, their passion, and their expertise, so that we can take those lessons and we can then apply them to the things that we're passionate about, that we're deeply obsessed about in what we lead, or our organizations or our communities, in a very kind of cross-pollinated way. But, after enough of these conversations, and you start to notice patterns. Like I notice patterns. One pattern that I've noticed is the community is literally kind of no longer optional. You can call it networking, you can call it ecosystem building, you can call it what I just called it, which is community. But whatever name you choose to use it, the truth is that these people that we're talking with every week are creating meaningful impact today, and they're not ever, rarely are they doing it alone. So in the case of like some of our recent guests, like Michelle Edgar and Ben Reese from the Community Collective here in Los Angeles, Roxanne Aragon from DTI, which is a leader in the space industry, space defense technology industry here in Southern California, Kristen Lau, the CTO of LAFC, one of our two huge MLS champion soccer football franchises here in Los Angeles, Jason Verghese from Pink Cloud, who talked to us about addiction community, and so many other folks that we've talked to just in this last 6 months. The lessons that they keep kind of honing in on and reminding us all is that like collaboration is really replacing competition, and that ecosystems or communities are really outperforming individuals, and that trust, and boy, Minda Harts talked to us about this last year, right? Trust is really not only becoming just kind of something we hope to have or that we aspire to as individuals or as organizations, but it's really becoming a competitive advantage. Both Minda in her conversation with me last year, and then Robin Ward back in a conversation back in the summer of 2024, reminded us that those organizations, those leaders, no matter the organization, again, private sector, public sector, those leaders that can engender trust and that can communicate in a way that helps people to understand that they see them, they hear them, as well as that they want to listen to them. Like, man, trust is literally a differentiator in today's world. Another big pattern, and this will sound a little bit more obvious to some of us, that I've noticed in these conversations the first 6 months of this year, is that technology seems to just be accelerating everything, right? You hear me talk a lot about us in 2026. We're 6 years removed from the pandemic. And while the pandemic was obviously a uniquely historic event, like a once in a century type of event, we're still all here in Los Angeles and everywhere else around the world, we're still all pulling ourselves forward from the effects of that event. And one of the main effects that I always talk about that the pandemic had on us was that it accelerated already existing or growing trends, right? It didn't necessarily individually, independently create a whole bunch of new trends as much as it really, really, really has accelerated a bunch of stuff. And we're seeing that in all the conversations we have. The most obvious one recently, currently, if you want to say, is AI, right? And artificial intelligence, and actually just even understanding what that is. We had a lot of conversations recently, like Matt Wright from New York, a good friend from here in Southern California, talked to us about like the principle behind individuals, consumers, individuals, business people, entrepreneurs being able to truly own the output of their AI, like own not just our data, but kind of own our persona. And we've got some fascinating conversations coming up where we're going to talk about that in the entertainment industry. We're going to talk about that from like a content and an intellectual property standpoint in some of our upcoming episodes the rest of the summer. But just this idea that AI is in every conversation I have at some point. You'll hear me joke in episodes sometimes if I haven't asked an AI question that like I inevitably feel like that the guild of podcasters forces me to ask an AI related question, right? So my point of view on all of this is that I feel like related to AI specifically, and just this idea of sweeping changes and everything happening at a pace that outstrips, frankly, our human ability, how we were designed to process information or to stack up multiple relationships on top of one another. I think we're in this fascinating kind of decision matrix moment societally on all of this. Much is clearly yet to be determined. I think, frankly, we're in an era still where there are far more questions than there are answers to be asked rather than given. But I also am seeing this thing lately, and it's presented itself in the conversations we've had on the podcast. And then it's obviously swirling around us all, and especially me here in my world as a podcast host, contemplating these topics, thinking about these issues, thinking about and preparing for the conversations with these incredible thought leaders, these entrepreneurial thinkers, as we call them. I think we're entering this era in which there might be a lot of interest around beginning to take back some of our power, as both consumers or individual users, and then at a more macro level as decision makers and policymakers. I believe that there is a renaissance of thought going on right now in which we're waking up to this idea that we don't simply have to roll over and accept what the five biggest tech oligarchical monopoly companies and broligarchs, as I like to call them, are telling us AI is going to be, and that therefore we have to get on that train or we're going to get run over or left behind. I think we are waking up to the realization that maybe in my lifetime, during Internet 1.0 in the mid 90s to late 90s, early 2000s, we did just accept the pablum of their sales pitch to us that was all going to make the world better, that massive interconnectedness was obviously a good thing, and that there would be no obvious downsides. Like, how could there be? This is the greatest thing ever. And we just kind of went along with that because it connected us. It did. because it does enable a lot of good to be done. It does, because it does allow us to connect with and learn from people who are different than ourselves, from different places, from different points of view, from different backgrounds and experiences. That's all true. But man, now, 25, 30 years into this thing called the internet and the interconnectedness of life, we're also seeing like the lagging downside threats to us and to the core nature of our human existence. And I think that timing being kind of maybe on the tail of the elephant, as they say, related to the internet now, 25, 30 years into it, coinciding with this birth of this supposedly next transformational set of technologies and, more importantly, experiences. I think folks are waking up and kind of saying like, wait a minute, hold on. I've got more questions. I'm not just going to take your word for it anymore, because you're mostly the same people that led us down this primrose path over here. And I'm not sure that this is the path we all just definitely just like openly just want to roll over and go down. So it's not so much like I say that technology is changing the world. That's not what's interesting. Like, that's not new to us, right? It always has and always will, no matter what you want to refer to as technology. Every era throughout human history has had a technology of the moment that has been transformational in many ways. And yet, as history teaches us all, when you look backward, like, there are also inevitable downsides. There are inevitable side effects that happen that we should be aware of. Right? So to me, what's interesting is this idea that human judgment, that creativity, and as I'll call it, that entrepreneurial thinking seems to be becoming ever more valuable in our discourse and how we decide what we want this world that we live in, that we work in, that we create in, that we create commerce in, that we trade in, that we create wealth in, that we create opportunity in, that we care for others in, like how we raise our families, how we take care of our grandkids, how we take care of our health, like all these things, what we eat. We talked about that recently in an episode with Priyanka Srinivas from Deep Bio, like some fascinating conversations, literally at a base level, like, hey, we have a chance to reinvent and reimagine and have some power and voice in deciding like what we grow and how we grow it and how do we produce food. Right? Is it only about mass production and mass access to food now? Or now that we've kind of gotten through that phase of our history, can we actually think intelligently and more compassionately about how we create better food? So not just more, which the world needs more food, more equally distributed, evenly distributed across all of our geographies, but also like better food for all of us, which then in turn leads to like our ability to extend our lives. Which again taps back into like our own consciousness and our addictive behaviors, like we talked about with Jason Biragesi from Big Cloud. So there's a lot that's going on, right? And I think a third pattern that is related to that I've seen merge out of these conversations is been this idea that like I think we're all looking for deeper meaning. I think we maybe, my opinions here only, I think we maybe believe that we could find, or we would find, the deeper meaning in this super connectedness that the internet and the technology was going to give us. Or now we're maybe just in the early days of thinking, I think falsely, that like, total empowerment of us by all these algorithms and by these AI technologies, like doing all this stuff for us, is going to free us up to chase our passions and just go in the garden because the world is going to be taking care of all the menial stuff that we don't want to do. And I think in that we're searching for meaning. We're not searching for like lazy outs, right? Off ramps that can say like, I don't want to work, and so do all this stuff for me. In fact, a lot of our guests, a couple of our guests over the course of the last 6 months have often said like, yeah, I'd be fine with AI actually figuring out how to like do my laundry, how to do my dishes, how to make my dinner, how to get my kids ready for bed, how to fix the car, rather than AI doing all the stuff that is the stuff that comes out of my mind uniquely, right? That is the thing that I have been valued for and that I value in my own creativity. So to me, the biggest surprise of that is how often these conversations that begin around business or industry or governance wind up becoming conversations around purpose. Right? We talked with Christian Lau, the CTO at LAFC and BMO Stadium here. in Los Angeles. And those guys are super focused on creating more and better in-person guest fan experiences in sports or concerts, entertainment, because people are craving that. Like they're wanting to spend more time in person in real life, but they just want to have like high quality experiences when they do it. We talked with Kareem Webb about how LAX, the Los Angeles International Airport, is actually really not so much an airport. It is, obviously, and it's a transportation hub, obviously. But he talked to us about reframing our understanding of it as an economic asset and as an engine for economic growth and prosperity throughout Los Angeles, and then specifically throughout the communities of the people that wind up working in a place like that, the tens of thousands of people that work behind the scenes at an airport that make it an easy experience for us as travelers. So like when you start thinking about things like airports as part of the human experience and as part of something that connects us all emotionally and economically in this ever digitally dominated, algorithm driven world, like that's mind-blowing stuff. And as always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show is produced by our team at the Storytellers Company in Mexico City and Los Angeles. And you can always find, like, follow, subscribe, and share our show as found on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you find your favorite podcast by searching Entrepreneurial Thinkers with Rob Ryan. You can also follow along on our various social media platforms for clips and contents at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And if you'd like to connect with me, our host, you can find me just about anywhere on social under the handle I am Rob Ryan. Thanks, and have a great day.